Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, welcome to another Lemon Amiga game guide and review. This time we're taking a look at the 1991 driving classic Lotus Turbo Challenge 2, developed by Magnetic Fields and published by Gremlin Graphics. So let's jump in and check this game out. Pressing the fire button to access the main menu, we can change the player's name, and you might notice we can have 2 players on this game, and we can also change the gears from manual to automatic. So we'll choose automatic there, fire to accelerate, and we can change the control of player 2 to use the keyboard or the joystick, but for this game we'll select the 1-player mode. As you can see, Lotus Turbo Challenge 2 is a rear view driving game. In this game we must race against the clock, and we must reach a checkpoint within that time, and if we make it then we will get another race and another checkpoint, and if we don't, well, we're out. It's as easy as that. There are no other players to beat on this game, except if you play this in 2-player mode, so all the player has to do is to drive safely and as fast as they can. To aid us, we are given a Lotus Elan SE, and that is not as quick as the Turbo Esprit we got to drive in the first game, and that grips the road almost like it's on rails, so attempting corners on this easy first level is just a matter of leaning in there early and passing a few cars along the way. Perhaps fortunately the AI of the other computer control players hasn't been improved in this game, and they will still meander left and right along the track, and it is very easy to preempt that meander, so as long as the player drives carefully, passing opponents in this case is absolutely no problem. The problem comes with the time, and even on this easy first level, the time becomes critical towards the end. This game was converted to a number of other platforms, and as you can see there, I'm comparing this to the Sega Mega Drive above, which is virtually identical except for the cars being flatter, and well, the Sega has better speed there, but the smoothness is not there on the Sega, so compromises had to be met. This game also appeared on the Acorn and the Atari ST, which are basically identical to the Amiga version. So instead of showing you those, let's compare this actually to Lotus 1, and keen-eyed players might notice this is actually Wales, and on Lotus 1, well, the sky is different and the trees are actually identical. But you can see the game engine has been improved, and this time if we collide with the side of the road, we will not be stopped dead, we will just rebound off those obstacles and keep going, which is great. At least we don't have to bear so many dead crashes like we did on Lotus 1, and that certainly keeps the action rolling. Back to the game, we can see another easy stretch of the road. There are so many bends, it's difficult to memorise these courses, but well, some bends will throw the player off, and it's time lost. It doesn't really matter about damage in this game. There are certainly no statistics we can tweak like Indy 500 that we reviewed, but this game is pretty basic when it comes to its controls, which are virtually spot on. There are little bits of inertia, particularly on the Lotus Esprit, which we'll see in the second level, but the Elan is pretty nimble and allows us to negotiate these roadside rocks. Yes, there are rocks lining the road just like the first Lotus, and you'll have to find out where they are if you want a good score in this game. You can see me feathering the accelerator there, simply letting go of the fire button, and releasing that will give extra grip to the car and will make that thing slow down enough for us to traverse these corners. And well, bumping into the back of cars doesn't really help, but sometimes that will slow the player down enough to be able to turn. And there are no major turns in this game, no major hairpins. The roadside obstacles are basically the things to watch out for. On this final stage of the first level, we will also find water jumps. These require us to hit those tree trunks to dive over that water. Unfortunately, I'm missing those tree trunks and losing time, so let's see how we did.
Congratulations! Marks! Set! Go!
The second level introduces us to the night races. Here we have to avoid all the other traffic and the roadside obstacles at high speed using the Lotus Turbo Esprit Mark III. And in this game, well, it's very difficult to keep that thing pointed in a straight line moving fast. So you have to be on the ball, and as soon as you see those chevrons appearing there, you can anticipate the road veering sharply in that direction. As long as the player is quick with that on-off fire button technique and that veering over to the side of the road technique, the player can usually anticipate all these bends. If not, well, we'll have a few knocks, and in Lotus 2, that's no bad thing. Level 2 starts off deceptively easy, and it won't take the amateur player very long to get to this stage in the game. But later on, the level 2 stages are quite tight with the time limits, so the player has to really be on the move. The difficulty curve in Lotus 2, to my mind, is pitch perfect. Every level and every stage will increase the player's durability and their experience in this game, and hopefully help them progress onto the next one. There are very few unfairnesses in this game, and usually playability is maintained throughout. Every level introduces the player to a new environment, and on the night courses the gimmick is you cannot see very far in front to anticipate those corners, so you really have to be on the ball. That will lead us into the very tight roads, going into the third level, where you really do have to be on the ball because there is no room to manoeuvre. On the first level we found 4 stages, and on the night courses we will find 8 stages. That continues onto the forest and the fog course, which is the next one, but unfortunately there is no visual representation of that on screen, so the player basically has no idea where they are on the level, which really is no problem, because unlike Lotus 1, it is not necessary to know where we are on the level, and unfortunately, well, we cannot judge how close we are to the end of the level, except to look at that time and anticipate that we've just about got enough time to make it to the end of the stage, which generally is a good philosophy to live by. So as long as we have seconds in the bank, then we are a go. Here we can see us flying at high speed in the tunnel section, which flows downhill, and exiting this you can anticipate more bends to throw us off entering this high speed section. And it can be distracting when we are bouncing over the road, but at least again it is not anywhere near as distracting as doing that on Lotus 1, where that would write off a lap. And so Lotus 2 is more of an arcade racer and even less of a sim, which is no bad thing. On the final stage of the second level, we get to drive at high speed through tunnels again, and this time we get to bounce off the sides of those tunnels. That again will not affect our speed a great deal, but that opens the door to a later level where bouncing up the sides of tunnels will really help us maintain a straight line. If we drive directly into these bends, we can preempt them and a few knocks won't harm us. An incredible number of bridges later, we find the end of the level. Will we have any time remaining?
Congratulations! Marks! Set! Go!
If you thought driving at high speed in night courses is hard enough, then think again, because the forest and the fog levels make sure that we cannot see further than the edge of the screen, and those cars will materialise on a pretty narrow road with the usual array of trees which we can jump over, and even oil patches which will send us off. The fog level really does raise the bar from the first two, and if the player can get through this level, then they can more or less write their ticket for a few levels. If they can't, well, it's game over. On this level, sometimes hitting obstacles and jumping over things is an advantage, but usually it is not. And careful driving, even if that means going slow to avoid these drivers, is better than having a few knocks, because slowing down on this Elan takes some time to speed up. And unlike the Esprit, we cannot speed down these things at high speed, because these very tight corners, especially as we go into the next stages, will get tighter and tighter, so speed will have to be maintained at an average to get us through to the end of the level. There are 8 stages in the fog level, so they will be racked off pretty quickly. And now I find oil on the road trying to throw us off, and a nice oil patch there every now and again makes life interesting in this game. Even though these roads are pretty samey, the graphics do not change, the cars do not change. In fact, these green generic cars are so samey they become bland and they melt into the background. But at least the roads are interesting, and with all these obstacles, the sound effects as well really adds to the experience. You can see the ticking down of the clock when that reaches 7 seconds to go is also an extra feature, and that will increase the tension of the player and those nerves as they run for the line. There's absolutely nothing the player can do if that thing's counting down and they have no seconds to go, if they have made a few crashes along the way. So that ticking tick-tock down of the counter basically gives us an indication of how far we are along the level, because if we can hear that noise, it means we must be somewhere towards the end of the stage, and if we don't hear that noise, then that means we've got time in hand, and if we hear that noise and it counts down to 0, that means we have no time in hand. Every second will be carried over onto the next stage, so we can accumulate score and time on these early stages, and that should mean the later ones are much easier. If we have time in hand, then we can afford to take a few knocks. And here we go, let's run for the line. You may saw I gained 1 second there, 31 seconds to complete this stage. And stunts like this aren't going to help. Well, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's Lotus 2. Sometimes you can crash directly into a tree and go off and wreck the entire level, but sometimes you can get away with it just like that. Sometimes getting around those difficult corners can be helpful if you bounce off and rebound off something, but most oftentimes that just slows down the player. You saw there, I only just made it to the checkpoint and I ran out of time. If that happens, the game will slow right down and you will have maybe 2 seconds to reach that checkpoint whilst that car is slowing down. If you make it, then fine. If you don't, well, it's game over. You have to do the thing all over again. There are no lives in Lotus 2, but we do have passwords which we can enter to practice any level. Practicing this fog stage is highly recommended, only because the time limits are so tight.
Congratulations! Marks!
fourth level, we must drive along a number of stages in the snow, with a great graphical effect there. As you can see, the snowflakes drifting down from the sky, and that's one of the best snow effects I have ever seen on an Amiga game. This level is definitely my favourite level in the entire game. It reminds me of the snow levels in Lotus 1, although the graphics, as you can see, are nowhere near as blue, and the road doesn't melt into the floor either. The road is clearly visible, and the graphics actually run faster and smoother than this level on Lotus 1. The trees are painted with snow, and it is atmospheric. Yes, every stage is identical, and apart from a few smatterings of ice and snow which blocks the road later on, this first stage is very fast and very quick. The player really does have to be on their toes with these very sharp bends, and these ice patches determine to throw us into those bends, so feathering the accelerator and wisely avoiding ice is a good tip. And if you do find yourself in a skid, simply lock the controller into the opposite direction, and that will basically recover the skid, absolutely no problem. Maybe even taking the fire button off at the same time, or at least you can press forward to accelerate in this game, but taking the forward off will help, but I actually prefer the fire to accelerate. And so on to the next stage, we find snow on the road, and all this will do is deplete our top speed down there by another 5 miles per hour or so. So we have to maintain that top speed over 150 on this level to get anywhere, and so 154 is great, 160 on the downhill is great, so we are making up time here. Avoid that traffic, that's all you have to do to get to the next stage. Given some speed, these graphics are really smooth, and even given this snow engine, the graphics do not slow down. Now we find ice all over the road, so avoiding that ice is the top priority. On some stages we can strafe the sides of the road to gain some progress, but on this one we can't, we'll sink into the snow. This level is certainly very fast, and again it's my favourite. The last stage is the longest, we have a whole minute to complete it, but it is the most difficult as well. There's nothing worse than going slowly into a level and having to speed all the way back up again, particularly if it's the last level. The skidding, crashing and sliding sound effects really add to Lotus 2, and even though they may be minimal compared to today's environmental racers, the sliding and crashing effects are great, and because those things only last a mere second, the player can get on their way and take a few risks. Yes, it's worth taking risks in this game as we reach the hardest, snowiest, iciest section of them all.
Congratulations!
The fifth level of the 8 presented in Lotus 2 is appropriately enough the desert, so we can make our way through the desert at high speed. If we meander off that road and venture into the sand, we will sink, and that will not only lose the speed, but one decent sinking effort will write off the entire game. So do not sink into the sand, do not crash, do not touch anything, especially not these blowing things which are tumbleweed, and if we touch one of those we will lose maybe 5 miles per hour, so if we collide with maybe 2 or 3 of those we will lose quite a significant amount of speed there, so avoid everything is the art of this game. Later on we will find big bends which will throw us off, and they will require us to brake. The game does not require us to brake under normal circumstances, and I virtually never brake in this game. Speed is the essence, and slowing down, well, sometimes it can be helpful when you can see these bends there. If it had moved any faster than that, it would have thrown me off. So just like Australia in Lotus 1, moving through this game slower in some sections can be helpful, and preempting all these bends can be helpful, but again, player cannot dally because the time just will not allow it. A little background. Lotus Turbo Challenge 2 was created by Sean Southern and Andrew Morris in 1991. Sean and Andrew started working together in 1982 when in February they created Mr. Chip software on the Commodore 64. There they created a number of complete games in 1984 for the 64, including Ad Infinitum, Olympic Skier, Duck Shoot, which we'll see later on, which was developed for the VIC-20, and then later in 1986 they co-created the C64 classic Trailblazer, which featured the Amiga ball, way ahead of its time, and they went on to create Trailblazer 2 as well, Pod, which stands for Proof of Destruction. They also created Kickstart 2, which came out in 1987, and Super Scramble Simulator appeared in 1989. They then moved on to the Amiga in 89 with a port Super Scramble Simulator, which is in fact quite a tough game indeed, and carries on from their Kickstart heritage. Later on in 1990 they released Supercars, and then in the fall of 1990 Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. In 1991 they released Supercars 2 in the spring, and then in the autumn they released Lotus 2 on the Amiga. They then went on to Kid Chaos, which was their last game on the Amiga, and basically they carried on going on the PC with similar driving games such as Mobile 1 Rally Championship, which they ended with in 1999 on the PC and the PS1. So Mobile 1 Rally Championship was their last title, and unfortunately Magnetic Fields then ended. They were aided in this case and in many other games by Peter Liggett, and he worked with the sound on other games as well for the Amiga, and he playtested this game for the Magnetic Fields crew. But as far as I know, none of those guys are actually still working in the business, although they did try to create another company that actually folded pretty recently, which was a shame. So unfortunately we do not get the wisdom of Sean and Andrew's driving experience. What we have is Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge and Lotus Turbo Challenge 2 on the Amiga, which, as we enter one of the harder sections in this level 5, I'm sure you'll agree that the programmer certainly did a great job. Andrew Morris did great palm trees there and great flowing details to the levels. The backgrounds there do not have parallax scrolling, but you can see the copper skies there really do make a great difference, and plunging downhill, the graphics really do appreciate high speed in this game. Sean Southern's graphics game engine is solid, and they were good enough to create Rex, which was the editor which was introduced in Lotus 3.
Congratulations!
Level 6 seizes on the Malta Way, and if you remember from Test Drive 2, I liked the Malta Way feel and action of driving games, so to see this early on in the 1990s was terrific. In this level, all we have to do is to stay in this 3-lane side of the Malta Way and avoid all the other traffic to make up time. If we collide with those other cars, we will find ourselves slow, and one crash leads to another in this game, particularly on the later levels, so it is essential to make up time earlier on, and that 11 seconds as we go under the line certainly helps. Trucks will slow the player down if you crash into those, and if you actually get underneath the ramp of the truck, you will actually hear "Yee-haw" being played, which is terrific. You can see I'm moving slowly here to avoid the other driver, and sometimes moving slowly in this section is helpful because that means further crashes are avoided and we are not slowed down. The classic title music of Lotus 2 was created by Barry Leach, who is certainly no stranger to Amiga music, having crafted Silkworm and Gemini Wing in '89, Impossible, which we shall see in a Playguide later on in 1990, Pegasus, Supercars 2 in '91, Lethal Weapon and Harlequin in '92. I think the classic Lotus 2 music has certainly been remixed a number of times, and it still sounds great. The samples used in this game are tremendous, and the mark set go at the beginning really adds a lot to the feel of this game. The samples used in the tracks and the title music actually came from the single Oh Yeah, which was released by the band Yellow in 1985. It was also used in the movie The Secrets of My Success, starring Michael J. Fox, and also in the classic Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which was released in 1987. Although there aren't too many sound effects in this game, certainly the legendary vacuum cleaner engine sounds of the Magnetic Fields crew certainly makes a return in this game, and well, that's the obligatory noise that you'll always find on Magnetic Fields driving games, but that's not so bad, and to be honest, this sound effect really fits in with the Lotus. In this level you can see me bouncing from one side of the level to another, avoiding the oncoming traffic, and we'll find cars approaching at high speed. If we do stray into the wrong lane by mistake, it's important to get back to the right side of the road. Yes, it is possible to drive down the wrong way of the Malta Way at high speed, but that trick will only last a limited number of seconds, so it's important to get back across there, and hopefully we can carry on towards the end of the level. Luckily, we have managed to accrue lots of time. And 19 seconds there as we go over the line will certainly give us plenty of time to complete the last level, which, if we are slow on the last level, which we are, and it is the hardest level of this section, which the last level always is, well, we'll certainly need all that time as we crash incessantly and make our way. The sound effects do change as we go under those motorway bridges, which is nice. Yet again, we missed the truck and the sound.
Congratulations! Mark, set, go!
Now things get rather tricky as we approach the 7th of the 8 levels in Lotus 2. This time we are moving through a glade, an autumn glade full of forest trees there, and we find the usual array of enemies and water traps along the way. But the gimmick of this stage is the Bagley Marsh, and here we are. The Bagley Marsh is a sinkable pit. If you end up in there, you'll find you will sink and you are no longer able to complete the game, so it is important to maintain that high speed, and as long as we preempt the bends, as soon as we see the bend turning in front of us, turn into that direction and avoid the marsh at all costs. On this section we will find oil patches return yet again, and that will throw us into the side and career us into the very easy competitors, and you'll always find oil there on the inside of those corners, so that makes overtaking manoeuvres slightly more difficult. The marsh is probably the level where most intermediate players will get stuck, and even the semi-pro can get stuck in Bagley Marsh due to a number of reasons. Number one, if they hit these ramps they can get over the water and save a lot of time. If they hit those 3 ramps, they will go off and they will lose a lot of time. So hitting the correct ramp to jump the correct water is essential, and that can only be mastered through trial and error. Playing this over and over and over again to hit the right ramps is crucial. Similarly, on the next section, avoiding oil or riding through the oil is a skill to master, and as we approach an oil-filled bridge, it is important to hold the stick either left or right here, and that will get us over the bridge absolutely no problem. Everything here is designed to slow the player down, and if they go off and slow down, that means they will no longer be able to maximize their time and have more time going into the further levels, which on this level, the Bagley Marsh level, is crucial. I have been known to complete this particular level very quickly indeed. As you saw, one collide with that log meant I crashed into the tree, which is not helpful at all. The logs will always be on the inside of every bend, so as long as we are on the outside, we can navigate around those and hopefully make up some time on these levels, which is certainly a crucial factor. On the next stage, it is important to go really slowly and to preempt all these bends really early and to avoid going off. That will slow the car down to maybe 115, 120 miles per hour, but at least maintaining that 120 means we get through this level quickly, and it means we don't sink and have any offs, because you can see the time limit ticking down there, or we're going to make it. Time is an important crucial factor, because on this section we'll find random pills in the road which will give us extra time. If we know where they are, that's fine. If you don't know where they are, then you will miss those and you will have no time to get to the end of the section, which is very, very tricky indeed given the advanced stage of this game. And so, having played this over and over again, I've actually memorized where most of those are enough to continue. But again, you have to memorize every single log, and that is not easy. But again, the players do have the elegance of passwords to play with, and so using passwords means we can practice these levels before we complete them in the main run. I'm having absolutely no effect on the Bagley Marsh here, so that's basically my time over. Or is it? The extra time on this section can be found on the inside of every bend, so as long as we are slow enough to collect that extra time every time, we can make it. If we miss one, we cannot. That's virtually 69 million points, and game over. Luckily, we can enter the password to the final level, and the final level is probably the hardest of them all. It's certainly the fastest and it's the most exciting. The 8th level is rather watery as we enter Eebo, and this is a very frantic, very fast race. In the Lotus Esprit, we cannot afford to hit a single driver if we want to complete the game, and hitting that bush earlier on has virtually written off our chances of completing this stage, never mind the game. So the clock ticks down there. You have to shave every single second off every corner in order to make it. If you don't, you won't. Next section we have to hit a power pill. That will give us turbo for maybe 90 seconds, and now we can avoid hitting everything as much as possible, but going at high speed means that is exciting. Our high speed will eventually wear off, but if we maintain maybe 150 miles per hour over the level, then that should mean an easy cruise onto the next stage. But as every single stage requires us to have time in hand, we need to make up time on every stage. And rocks there on the side of the road have to be memorised again. If we collide with those rocks, then we've written off our chances. And all or nothing in this game, so it's worth taking a few risks and hopefully avoiding as many of these rocks as possible until we get on to the next stage, which features even more turbo power-ups and more immense speed. The rain doesn't affect the controls of this game, certainly no spins or slides due to the rain, but the sound effects are great. Avoiding players at high speed here, running at full frame rate, and it's a pity that the rest of the game doesn't run at this frame rate, then that would be a sheer experience indeed. But unfortunately we only get to feel the full action on the final stage with those turbos, and if if we are lucky and aim those things directly in the middle of the road, we can pick up those turbos, which are again a crucial factor, and we have to pick up every single one of those. If we miss a turbo, then that's race over. The loud thunder and lightning really adds a lot to this level, and these were probably the best water effects that we saw on the Amiga. You can see the tyres splashing away there, and the rain belting down, which does not obscure vision, which is great, but it is certainly wet weather out there. One ricochet into a number of boulders means we will find life tougher, but this is not the end of the road, because the game allows for a number of knocks every so often. We can make up time and collect those turbos. Taking a look at the scores for this game, Amiga Format gave this 87%, Amiga Power gave this 87%, the One gave it 91%, Amiga Computing gave it 91%, CO Amiga gave it 94%, and Amiga Action gave it 95%, praising the split screen 2-player action, the 2-player link mode, and the fact that you could actually link computers with the Amiga or the Atari ST version. If you had two computers, you could link those together. I think Lotus Turbo Challenge 2 is highly polished, very playable. The controls, the graphics, the sound and the playability are excellent, and so I'd highly recommend this game. The Sheffield-based Gremlin Graphics were actually famous for including hidden games within their games, and Lotus 2 is no exception. If we should return to the title menu and enter Ducks as the password, we will get to play a version of Sean Southern's Ducks game, which was again released on the Commodore 64 in 1984 as Duck Shoot, and Duck Shoot makes its return here. The aim of this game is to fire our gun at all these opponents, and if we fire at the 5, we will gain 5 bullets, and everything else gives points. The aim is to clear the screen of all these items, and you'll see ducks there. They are yellow at this point, but they will change colour later on. The yellow indicates those ducks only take 1 hit to destroy, and at this stage all these items only take 1 hit. The hardest part is to preserve the bullets, and waiting there to find another bullet. There's another 10. Let's grab that as a highest priority. Missed it again. There we go. And that should just about give us enough bullets to complete the level. These hidden games are relatively nothing compared to the main game, and this is simply sample code which was bolted on there to fill the disk, but still, adding extra games to Gremlin games is actually a very novel feature, and these hidden Easter eggs on the Amiga were basically invented with items like this. So basically you get Easter eggs on every game these days, but back in the day this was certainly a novelty. If you gain the crack, then perhaps the ducks will not be included, because on most cracks ducks isn't, but on the ADF time playing at the moment it is. So let's just clear this first level. And now we acquire more bullets and more targets for level 2. I have never actually managed to complete level 2 because it is so fast and requires so many bullets and shots on target. But again, because this is a hidden bonus game, we can't expect too much from this, and so anything in the way of bonus games is great. Unfortunately, we cannot quit back to Lotus 2. We have to reset the computer if we want to return to the driving part of the game, but if we want to shoot a few random objects, or miss a few random objects there, bullets seem to have passed straight through the 10, but yes, it's certainly novel. So, thank you for viewing my play guide and review to Lotus Turbo Challenge 2. I hope you enjoyed our little review of the game, and hope to see you again in another play guide sometime soon. So, thank you.